we'll go ahead and start on this thing. This is a thing about chasing noises. You know, I did one a while back about noise, vibration, and harshness, and it was basically we were talking more about finding the specific frequency of things, first, second, and third order vibrations, and all that kind of thing. And in this particular presentation, this is like NVH2, and everybody can benefit from it because everybody sooner or later is going to have to deal with trying to find some kind of a funky noise. Now, hard AC lines, for example, in contact with the shock tower can conduct all manner of engine noises to the customer's ear through the car body. Where there's motion, there's usually noise, and when parts are touching one another, there's usually noise. That's why a lot of stuff has basically got rubber parts that are insulating it and all that. And whenever you were talking the other day about these seemingly meaningless pieces of metal that were bolted onto the exhaust that were sticking off that Crown Victoria, what those are there for is to change the resonant frequency of the exhaust system so that it doesn't cause a body boom and that kind of thing. So if you add mass to something, like a lot of times you'll see a piece of something that's sticking up there that doesn't even look like it's got a reason to be there, a piece of metal that maybe mounted on rubber or something. And that is so that the frequency of whatever it is that's trying to cause it to begin to vibrate will actually be neutralized by changing the mass of whatever it is. Sometimes, have you ever seen something on a drive shaft that looks like a harmonic balancer back there? That's basically to prevent, you know, it's like it's got rubber in there and it's got an outside ring and all that. That's basically for that. So there's a lot going on between the road and the seat we're sitting in, and with all the dynamics that are related to the brake, suspension, and steering and wind turbulence, noise hunting is not for faint-hearted people. So you got machines, you got speed, and you got the road, and you got these people here, these plastic resonators. You ever see those things? It's just a big old plastic part of the thing sticking off to the side. And basically what that does is it's there to keep whenever you're accelerating, they want it to be as quiet as possible. You ever see somebody like on this Cadillac out there, this old Cadillac with a carburetor on it, they have the breather turned upside down?
Yeah, what's it do with that?
Well, whenever, to begin with, they think it lets it get more air. Secondly, they like the sound of it when they're going into the four-barrel. It goes, makes a nice, strong sound.
Well, this exhaust on it.
Huh?
Mine has exhaust on it. So
Yeah, well that little thing right there is basically supposed to prevent noises when when you're really getting on it, like if you're having to pass a car. They don't want you hearing all of this hoot noise business going through, because sometimes you'll have that. It's a resonance chamber, it's kind of like a muffler, but it's sort of off to the side. And a lot of these vehicles have got that. Not every vehicle has it, but a lot of them do. But that's a resonance chamber. And you get a better look at it probably if I turn off the light. When you see that, that's what it's for. It's basically to deal with noise. And that's a little arrow that I put pointing at it. Now, whether noise problems are real or perceived, they can be elusive. They can telegraph from one part of the car to the other. You'd swear the noise was coming from up here and it's being made back there and it's going through stuff and it sounds like it's up there. Like example, there was this one Nissan Altima that was making a funky noise that was coming from way up here it sounded almost like it was between the firewall and the engine. That was a racket, and it turned out that the noise was originating down here at the catalyst because it had a crack in the catalytic converter, and that exhaust noise was following that heat shield up and then going under that shield on top of the engine, and the noise was actually coming out way up there behind the engine. When we finally tracked it down and we pulled that cover off, you could see the crack in the catalytic converter. Well, I pulled the catalytic converter off and sent it over to the welding department. They just MIG'd it, Didn't have to buy a catalytic converter for that one. Although on Altima, I will tell you this, Altima catalytic converters like to come apart on the inside, and the EGR funnels that stuff into the motor that destroys engines. So it's a good idea to look in there with a borescope, take the oxygen sensor out, look in there, see if it's starting to come apart. That one was okay. Noise is defined as an abnormal sound. Vibration is a trembling sensation that's usually tied to engine or road speed. And harshness is related to the way a vehicle rides. So that's noise, vibration, and harshness. You ever ride one and it feel like you was in a Jersey wagon, like you was talking about the hard suspension earlier? That's harshness and all that. Noise is something you hear, vibration is something you feel that's related to the speed of things. So various frequencies, low to high. When noise impacts our eardrums, we tend to sort those auditory inputs out. My wife is really, really good at picking up noises that are not normal in the house. Like if the refrigerator, whenever it's filling up its ice maker, sounds different than it usually does, she picks up on that. And she'll I mean, if we're talking, she'll say, wait a minute, and she's got to find the source of that and figure out what's going on. And she's got a really good ear for that kind of thing. Well, there's some customers that are sticklers. They'll see a monster waiting behind every little noise. Every little noise is something that's going to blow up in their face, and they're worried about it. And then there's some other people that don't notice anything short of a roadside bomb. You know, they just ignore everything. You know, just whoopee. You know, I don't care. And this, you remember the perfect example of this was that girl on this little Cobalt that we're waiting on an engine for right now. When it was in here, and Harley found that vacuum leak, fixed her where it was running. But when we drove it to make sure everything else was all right, the doggone axle bearing, I mean the front wheel bearing, hub bearing on that thing was so dadgum noisy you couldn't even hear the radio. You know this business about turning the radio up? You know, but she wasn't complaining about that. She didn't even pay any attention to it. But I mean, it literally sounded like a, well, not exactly, but you know how if you're right close to a tornado siren, woo, you know, I mean, except this thing was like a, it was just horrible. I don't think I've ever heard a wheel bearing that was rolling, you know, smoothly as that was, and had that much sound to it. We put a wheel bearing on there, and it sounded really quiet after that. I'd ought to cut that thing apart. I think I still got it here to see what it looked like in there, but it was terrible. Anyway, but like I say, she didn't have a clue. Well, one element is to make sure the noise you're chasing is the one the customer's complaining about. I've talked about this before. I've actually seen a situation where there was a racket that really bothered me, that I just absolutely couldn't stand to drive this car. And I'd work on it and get that racket there straightened out. And then the customer comes in and says, still doing it. Well, let me hear what you're talking about. So I get in the car, and I'm hearing some little noise over here. It don't bother me at all. I said, that's what I didn't care about this other noise. I wanted this one fixed. You see, I've already spent 2 hours fixing the noise that I thought they were talking about, because in my mind that was terrible, but they were hearing something else that they didn't like because of whatever reason. So the smart thing to do is sit there fanning in the car and drive it and listen to what they're talking about. And if you can't hear it, there may be a problem. You need to, you know what I'm saying? You're going to have a problem finding something you can't hear. That's the other thing. But I've actually had that. Well, you might remember the story, and I went over this before, but we'll talk about this because I got a reason for going here. There was a 96 Mustang that had a buzzing noise at road speed. And the customer says it seemed to be originating from the instrument cluster at highway speed. The reason they gave it to me, I was doing drivability and electronics, was because it was coming from the instrument cluster, and if it was an instrument cluster problem, I usually got that job. Well, they felt like, oh yeah. And you know, it did kind of sound like a noisy speedometer cable, and we used to have to pull those out there and lube them and put them back in. This one didn't have a speedometer cable though, it was an electronic speedometer. And it sounded for all in the world like it was coming right out of the instrument cluster area. It's a buzzing racket. And me and the shop foreman got in it, and we rode it together after we, you know, fooled with it. And it wasn't as audible. He found his windbreaker laying in the back seat, and he would hold it up in front of his head while we were driving it, listening to that buzzing noise. And when he got it right about here, he couldn't hear it. So he'd move the windbreaker and he'd hear it. He'd move the windbreaker to hear it. You know, like I say, and he said, I wonder if there's something to do with this trim up around the windshield. So we taped that up with masking tape. And we were trying to figure out if maybe if there's wind getting under this trim, you know, bouncing it, and taping the trim up didn't change nothing. But this guy right here, the guy that owned the vehicle had to take it before we got through with it. And when he came back, he said, I found out what it was. And he was a fighter pilot, had been in Vietnam. And he said that he understood wind dynamics and stuff like that. And he noticed that when he had his window down a little bit and had his hand up on the roof, he was hearing that noise and he could feel it on his fingers, you know, in the air. And so he pointed his finger around until the tip of his finger started vibrating just perfectly where it was real sensitive. And he stopped his car and he got out and he looked down his finger, and his finger was pointing right at the edge of his bug shield. And he said, well, that bug shield is doing that. And so he got some little, he was a handyman of sorts too, he got some little Velcro and some aluminum, and he put it on the tips of the edges of that bug shield so that it couldn't vibrate, and all of that noise went away. Well, he could have removed his bug shield, but he wanted the bug shield. And so he put that little, he actually just made him something to show on the bug shield. That was the thing. Well, that bug shield, and it was one kind of like that, you know, was creating this really high frequency disturbance in the wind. It was picked up by the windshield like a big diaphragm, and it was amplified and projected downward of the speedometer area. And it sounded to us for all the world like it was down here, but it was coming from way out there. See, it was telegraphed. All right, that was the conclusion. Now here's the progression. Noises have an originator, a conductor, and a reactor. There's a place that's causing it. There's something that's conducting the noise, and then there's something that you see or feel that's actually your steering wheel, sun visor, something like that, you know. All right, there's your little OCR down there. You can remember it that way, OCR. You know, that doesn't stand for optical character recognition. It stands for, you know, originator, conductor, and reactor. Well, in this case, the originator was the bug shield, the conductor was by way of the air, the windshield, and the area around the speedometer head turned out to be a reactor, because that's where we were thinking we were hearing, right? Didn't see the speedometer head moving with the noise, but the cluster was written as a symptomatic component. So, and the word reactor is the most noticeably affected component. And you'll see a lot of times if you've got your sun visor hanging there, it'll do that. With the vibration, the reactor might be the sun visor, the seat, the steering wheel, something like that. You know, they used to make Ford Tempos that were all-wheel drive, but they never really could get them to run smoothly because it would feel like it was, you know, putting the seat of your pants to sleep, you know, when you sit in the seat. And that was the deal on that. Now, one of the chief reasons a braided ground strap is typically used between the engine and the body is because copper wire has a tendency to carry sound. And that's why you see so many of these kind of things. The flexibility of the conductor is another deal, but they don't want that sound being carried, and that's why you'll have that. Now, I personally have never seen one of those funky little ball chains, but at the same time, I've seen them things right there. So this thick copper wire carries noise and vibration really well. So fuel systems are frequently outfitted with pulsation dampers. You ever seen that little diaphragm looking thing that's mounted on the fuel rail that if it had a vacuum line going to it, and sometimes they even do, you'd say that looks like a fuel pressure regulator, and what's it on there for? Basically, it's like jumping on a trampoline. Every time the injectors fire, you know, if the fuel lines are resting, or, you know, even though they're going through little anchors underneath the floorboard and all that from the gas tank, that fuel line is liable to sit here and go pop, 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 and bounce against it. Every time the injectors fire, you may have a noise. So to prevent that, they put these pulsation dampers on there. They kind of look like that. The little fuel pressure regulator looking device, and it's basically like a little accumulator that pressure bounces that thing against that. All right. Now, this was a picture under the hood of my yellow Jeep that I used to drive. And whenever somebody changed the oil on that thing, invariably, if it wasn't me, that canister purge solenoid would shove it down like that, and it would wind up with the snout of it underneath that suction line on that air conditioner. And have you ever heard one of those things operate, particularly on a Chrysler? It makes a noise. It goes, I mean, it sounds about like that. That's why it's mounted on rubber, and it kind of flops around. Well, if it's trapped under that, with that little thing up underneath that line, when you're driving that Jeep, you would swear you have an engine knock. You just swear it. I mean, it just sitting in there, thought, oh no, the engine's knocking, because it was being carried into the body of the car and amplified by the dash, and it sounded like you had a rod knocking. I mean, when it was sitting there idling, you'd hear it. If it started purging, you'd say, what is that? What is that? You know, but all I had to do to make the noise go away, move that out from under that so it wasn't resting up against it. All right. Now, dry steering stops, like this right here. This is on a Crown Victoria, and they're notorious for that. A lot of them have steering stops like this. You notice where this has been touching over here, and it's been going up and down as that lower control arm moves. If somebody turns that hard left or hard right, and this is dry, and they're going over bumps and stuff, they're going to hear racket. And they're not going to like it. It's squeaking and popping and just all kinds of funky other noises. So what you can do to fix that is sort of brush that off a little bit and smear some grease on there. Sometimes grease is the answer, right? And this is a good thing you can do when you're doing a vehicle inspection. Just put some grease on that thing, because if they turn it, they're going to say, oh, it makes a noise when I'm turning, you know. Just go ahead and eliminate that to begin with by putting some grease on there. Sometimes the noise doesn't have a conductor or reactor, it's just a noise, like a locked up viscous fan clutch on a rear wheel drive vehicle. That thing's locked up, it's going to sound like an airplane, it's going to rob a bunch of your power, and I don't know, at the time somebody's come and said, I got no power and my engine's loud. Switch it off, you try to grab the fan and turn it, it's locked up solid. You put a $90 fan clutch on there, now it's quiet again, their gas mileage and their power back. That's roaring and robbing power. Now this Monte Carlo came to us one day with this nasty whining noise that the owner determined to be the transmission because he paid for a transmission overhaul and it had a lifetime warranty on it. When we drove the car, it didn't sound like a planetary gear set, which is usually where a whining noise is coming from in an automatic transmission. It was something else. Under the hood, the noise was really strong in the belt area. So what we do is we pull the belts off and we spin the pulleys, and we found out the AC compressor clutch bearing was shot. Believe it or not, you can buy those dadgum things on Amazon and online, and they're not all that hard to change. Just that bearing's like $17. You know, to go that far to do that. But anyway, that one right there took care of that. He had no more noise. See, he thought he got a transmission problem just because, well, I guess he had his antenna up because he had a transmission put in. Well, this is how you do it. You know, remember that? You remove the belt and spin all the pulleys, you're going to feel, you could feel some of those pulleys on that timing belt job you're doing didn't feel right. When you spun them, they were a little bit rough, and it's always good to nip that in the bud. Some of the Dayco belts that are shiny with fluted crosscuts will sound like a bad bearing. More about that in a minute. A bad idler pulley bearing on a Ford Windstar, or one of those 3/8 like that, can make a noise that you would swear was a bad power steering pump. But they only make noise when heavily loaded. So even if you pull the belt off one of those and spin it, the bearing may feel okay. But I actually put a power steering pump on one time, and then I found out it was that idler, that bearing. But you couldn't tell unless it had a heavy load on it that it was. A lot of the time bearings are like that. Unless they're loaded heavy, you won't hear a noise. And that's really disgusting. Like sometimes if the vehicle's up in the air and there's no weight on it, you won't hear it when you just spin it through. You know, so that's something you got to be, you know, part of it. It breaks the ballgame. Now, the wheel and axle bearing noises can be isolated by swerving. Everybody's pretty much done that here. The basic rule of thumb is when the car is swerved to the left, the right bearing is loaded more heavily. And there's times that diagnostic's not accurate. Like I always talk about my aunt's Crown Victoria, that I would have sworn in a court of law on the witness stand that the left rear axle bearing was bad, and it turned out it had a bad tire on the left front. I mean, when you were driving it, everybody would hear this noise coming from back here, but the stupid left front tire was where that noise wound up being. And a good tire can look good and be noisy. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not. A tire can look good and pull. You know, you move the tire to the other side, if the noise moves or pulls the other way, you got tire issues. Well, these bearings right here, that you're going to see in this picture, all came from the same vehicle. This came out of the rear end. It's on a 2003 Ford Explorer. And this right here is the hub bearing from the outside.
It's got a bag around.
Huh?
It's got a bag around.
Well, I was thinking that, but I didn't find one. You know what I'm saying? I had seen that, or I'd known of it on a RX-7, it calls that. But that particular one was making a lot of racket. As a matter of fact, on my computer, I've actually got those sounds recorded, or we recorded them with our chassis here. All right, so we replaced all the bearings in the rear end, but we still had noise. I mean, when you replace the bearings in the rear end and you see this nonsense, you think you got it, don't you? Well, then when we hear a still noise, we took our chassis here and put it out there on them doggone hubs, and they were noisy as all get out, and those bearings were wiped out too. They're not even swimming in the same oil because we got CV axles going out there. Anyway, changed them all. And these chassis here, we've got both of these. We got this one with the wires, and I'm going to be honest with you, I like this $150 one better than I do that $450 one. Because this one right here just doesn't work as good as that one. Whenever I'm listening for a noise, I want to get down and dirty, I get one of these. I mean, we got this one here with that little, you switch from channel to channel with your headphones hooked up to your little box. You know, these are all microphones right here. This all have to, we got that, but I don't like it. And don't use it a whole lot just because I don't like it. We actually can run this through, you can run it through the radio auxiliary port like we did on that Toyota. Some of y'all might remember that. All right, so when hunting noises in the engine compartment, a plain old $13 oscilloscope is handy. If you can't hear the noise with a probe, pull the end off the tool and use it for a listening pipe. You might have seen me do that out here. What you can hear with a pipe is really something. When my dad used to adjust the carburetors, the two carburetors on these old Type 3 Volkswagens had two carburetors on it, he would take a piece of paper hose like he used, and he would listen to one carburetor and then the other. And he would adjust them with his fingers, he'd listen to them. He never told me what he was listening for, but he could listen to them and tell, and he could make that thing run real smooth. But anyway, this is a really good story here. Owner goes to AutoZone, buys an alternator because that seems to be where his noise is coming from. but the noise is still there. Now, I don't know if he bought the belt and or whatever at the same time, but one way or another, this is what the belt looked like. AutoZone checked the alternator when he took it back. No problem in the electrical sense, the noise can be heard on the stand. He goes, ah, we found it. But they put another remanufactured alternator on there, didn't make the noise on the stand, passed electrically, but the noise was still there on the truck. And this is a whining noise, yeah, yeah, you know, like that. The owner replaces the idler, the belt tensioner, and the belt. Now, this is right, I may be out of order with this. He may have put the belt on when he put the alternator on, so don't quote me in this order, okay? At his wit's end, comes to see us for a quick fix. So he didn't bring his old belt, left him at home, take the fan off. You can screw the fan off this one and everything's fine because the pulley bolt's on, but the fan's got that big, you know, thread. Screwed it off. We don't want to lose a finger, so we can actually listen to it now with our listening pipe stethoscope without having the fan blowing. And when we're listening, we're hearing a really loud noise where the belt's going against the pulley. You know, not here listening to it, but we're listening, hearing it right there. All right. So I called the parts store and have them send a tensioner just to try it. Noise is still there. So I listened to the pulley really loud at the point of contact, and I'm thinking the fluted cuts across that shanty belt are whistling. And that's what, if you see a belt that looks like that, and you got a whining noise, and I've seen this a bunch of times since then. Adam called me one time when he was working over in Ozark, and I've tried this thing making a racket. And like this, and he described that noise. I said, what does it sound like? He says, a whining noise sound like a power steering pump or a bearing or something. What's a belt look like? Is it shiny that's got fluted cuts like that? Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. I said, get a belt that's fuzzy looking, like a Gates belt or something, you won't have any more noise. And he did, and the noise went away. And the belt said made in USA, and when we pulled that one off, I didn't see a name brand on it. Well, I ordered a Gates belt from Auto Value Parts House, and everything was fine, you know. All right, there was a whistling noise I encountered on a new Ford Ranger. Walked by there, heard them, and whenever they'd crack the throttle, it would go. It was really loud. And they had replaced the throttle body gasket because when they cracked the throttle, it changed the sound. But it turned out this check valve over there at the brake booster was cracked. And the way that I found that was I got a piece of heater hose and stuck it up to my ear and was just listening around, and whenever I got to that thing there, I heard that noise really, really loud, and they got one of those and put on there, and all that noise went away. That guy was basically saying, if you can fix the whistling noise, I'll buy the truck. And the next day, the general manager gave me some money to go eat lunch with because they got a sale. This was a brand new truck, you know, and somehow that had been put on there either. I couldn't see where it was cracked, but it was making a whistling noise because there was air leaking somewhere. I don't remember all the details. But it was originating 2 feet from the place where they had tried to do it, so they assumed that since it was cracking the throttle, it was whistling, it had to be somewhere around there. All right, the manager at the city garage beat himself working on what sounded like a roaring or rumbling bearing noise on a Crown Victoria police unit, but it turned out this guy had an American flag on the antenna, on one of the, you know, the radio antennas that the police use, and it was going boom in the wind when he was driving. And the antenna had a wire hook to it that was going down into the trunk of the police car to the VCRs and all that kind of hogwash. And after they had replaced all of this stuff, you know, all these tires and bearings and all that kind of stuff trying to make that stop, it turned out that the flag was the cause of the noise. So he did a lot of work for that. All right. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why a 2000 Jeep Cherokee was making a scrubbing noise during turns. Look at all those happening. That's crazy, isn't it? And these had new but noisy brake pads. Whenever you would turn, it would make noise, but when you were going straight, it didn't. And it didn't make noise when you hit the brakes, but the brake pads were what the problem was. So that was a scrubbing noise. All right. So this is the last slide. This right here. A lot of the times when somebody gives up on it and they send it over there, you know, they threw in the towel because it knocked them out. And when you go over there, the cool thing about whenever they worked on it, it's sort of a double-edged sword. If they've already done all the obvious stuff, then they've eliminated a bunch of things you don't have to fool with. Except if they put parts on there that may not be bad, you could be, sometimes you got to undo what they did so you can go back and find out what's really wrong. But everybody sooner or later, if you're a troubleshooter, you're going to have to get into the deal of finding a noise, you know, clamps, hoses, rubbing on. There's all kinds of stuff. You know, you could go on for 2 days talking about all the different kind of noises that a vehicle can make. But this was a quick rundown on that. And usually try to do this when we're doing driveway. Okay, so somebody tell me something that you learned that you didn't know before.
A flag can make a weird noise.
Hey, you ever heard? That's in the cosmetology department that take all morning long. That's something else we do.
Well,
Good haircuts, but they take a while. Huh?
Them steering stops in the Crown Vics can make a lot of noise.
Yep, they can. Now you may or may not have somebody that's going to turn it to the locks and go over a bump, but you can see how that would go, you know, and make a racket. Put grease on there, they ain't got to deal with that. So, and all these vehicles got steering stops. You know, if you look, they got a steering stop somewhere, typically.
Shiny belts with little cutscene lights on.
Yeah, I used to have one of those belts laying over there that you could hold in your hand and look at, but I don't know where it is now. It's over somewhere.